named after Elizabeth because she was the Virgin Queen. Okay.
She said.
She said. We're not going there. You
Well,
want to
first he
know
doesn't
about
believe the
Elizabeth?
stomach cancer,
Read
now
the
he
book.
doesn't believe the Virgin.
Actually, more likely the stomach cancer.
Exactly.
Okay.
Ovarian cancer, right?
All right.
Right.
Page 121 in your books, please.
Yeah, very, very
Are we supposed to move this far?
Yeah,
No, but I'm
like on chapter
jumping.
2.
You know, what I'm doing and because I've given you these outlines, the thing that would be good, you don't necessarily have to read the whole book at one time, but if I say page number, it would be good for you to read that particular section. I'm doing this by topics, not by chapters.
That is such a mercy.
I really just an extra chapters, but.
Okay, so who's the guy on the right?
Samuel Seabury.
Okay,
Remember it well.
Look at those
that's all I didn't know you were that old.
She was there.
Okay, he was the first bishop in America. However, how did he get consecrated as bishop? Did he go back to
He
England?
went to Great Britain. Yes,
No.
he went to England.
He went to England, and what was he told?
He couldn't get consecrated
Correct.
without an act of parliament.
Correct. Because you had to have 3 bishops who would consecrate another bishop, and he did not find 3 bishops who would consecrate him.
Because parliament wouldn't do it.
Because Parliament wouldn't do it. So where did he go?
Scotland.
Scotland. The Scots. The Scots got 3 bishops, consecrated Seabury. Back to America he came and was the first bishop. He then consecrated. We had 2 other bishops who went back over to Scotland to get them consecrated as well. So you would
They
have
went to,
3.
the others got consecrated in England. He was the only one in Scotland.
You just have way too much knowledge in that head of yours, Charlie.
They went over after the Revolution.
Okay.
White and who's the bishop in New York?
It's right here on page
Provost,
121.
if you read the page.
Okay, you have William White and you have
Provost.
Samuel
Provost.
Provost.
Yeah,
Okay,
Provost.
you're right, you're absolutely right. And so they went back to England and they were consecrated. So now you have 3 bishops in the United States, and if you have 3 bishops, you can consecrate another bishop. But Samuel Seabury could not go back to England because they just flat out would not do it. Now, there is a seminary named after Samuel Seabury, named Seabury Seminary. Okay, it is one of the seminaries that is in the Episcopal Church within the United States. There are, I believe there are 6 of them. I could be wrong on that. One of them I know has closed, which is actually the one that's named after him, Seabury Western, has closed. So now I believe there are 5, but maybe there are still 6. Okay, so you have Samuel Seabury, and what this guy says is look at all those Episcopalians. Okay, so you have the Episcopal Church in the United States that is growing. But what has happened in the United States with the boat? With all the people coming over on the boats? They're coming over for
Jobs.
Religious freedom.
religious
Land.
freedom, land,
Yeah.
religious freedom, land. Streets are paved with gold. Okay?
Not hard.
So you have, not hardly, but they're mostly paved with dirt and mud. However, you have all of these people that are coming over, and the Episcopal Church is growing by leaps and bounds because it is, Ethel,
Via the medium.
there you go, the middle way.
So what time period are you talking about?
We're talking about after the American Revolution. Okay?
789.
Yeah, you've got
But
Samuel.
it wasn't growing like the Methodists were. I mean, it was.
Now, come on.
Where?
The Episcopal Church has never grown like the Methodists, like the Baptists.
Right.
I'm not sure about the Presbyterians, but the Methodist Church, okay, let's talk a little bit
Yeah, let's
about the
get that.
Episcopal Church and what has come out of that. So, you just mentioned the Methodist Church. Who started the Methodist Church?
John Wesley.
John Wesley. His brother was Charles
hymns.
known for?
Hymns.
Hymns, music, beautiful music, okay? So you have John Wesley, who is a lifelong Episcopalian. He never became a Methodist, but he wanted people to have a method to be able to worship. He didn't want this broad and hazy kind of a way that might have been going on. What he wanted was people to be able to have a method, but he used the Book of Common Prayer in order to do that. Now, you have, not being a Methodist, I am not particularly up on all of the terminologies, but the Methodists have their own book, I would suppose. They have their own way of saying this is how we worship. Okay, so you've got the Methodists. Who else comes out of the Episcopal Church? If you go back to the diagram on page, what is that, 112?
AME, I would think.
Okay, who are they?
African Methodist Episcopal.
Okay,
And so you certainly have
Anglican Protestant.
blacks who didn't like the way they were treated in either the Episcopal or Methodist churches, leaving to form their own churches with black ministers.
okay. You had, and they would not have liked the way that they were treated. Not only were they slaves, but after their freedom, where would they sit in the church? In the balcony. Okay? If you go to St. John's in Olney, you were a member of St. John's in Olney.
I
There-
was too.
You were too.
Long
Long time ago. There was a balcony. There was a balcony there. Years and years ago, before St. John's got moved to its present site, it was a little church, and it was up Georgia Avenue. And if you went there, and if you were a black person, you would have to sit up in the balcony. St. Bartholomew's, as far as I know, never had a balcony.
I saw some pictures of St. Bartholomew's at the old church, and it was a small church, as you knew, but the blacks could sit outside, and I guess the door was open so that they could participate, at
Okay,
least here.
okay. And you would know that because you were on the
Historic.
historical committee, the bicentennial committee.
But Charlie White told me that, and then took me to the town hall to show me pictures of that.
And that's a good point.
But
If
that would be the church we're in now, because Charlie White's not old enough to go back
I
before.
said he told me about
He
it.
took her to that town hall
And showed
to see
pictures.
her.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And we never could find that, because I wanted to find that for the historical.
If you go to the town hall, they are open on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 1. You grab a hold of Charlene, who is the receptionist there. You get her to call the mayor, Dan
Pratt?
Prats. Get him to take you upstairs. And he will show you pictures. He will show you things that belonged to St. Bartholomew's, that belonged to people from St. Bartholomew's. There's something there from Dorothy Tector that some of you remember, okay?
Bell family.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So go over, get Charlene to tell the mayor to come over and lead you upstairs, and you will learn about some of the things that happened in Laytonsville regarding during the time pre-post, and way post Civil War. Okay? So you have the Methodists. Presbyterians, where did they come from? Who started the Presbyterian Church?
The Church of Scotland, wasn't it?
Were they Calvinist?
Calvinist. Okay, Geneva. That would have been Switzerland?
Switzerland, yeah.
Switzerland,
Yeah, but I
okay.
mean, Presbyterian, you always think of coming out of Scotland.
Oh, I don't. Well, but they were. Presbyterians were in Scotland, but they were started by Calvin, who was in Geneva.
Because I thought there was, but the Dutch Reformed Church is also Calvinist. And I thought there was a French Reformed Church that pretty much was squashed by Louis XIV or by the French government. I mean, do Protestants in Geneva today call themselves Presbyterians?
You have
I
to
would
ask
think
one
they'd
of
call
them.
themselves Swiss Reformed or something like that.
I don't know. your guess is as good as mine, and if you know that, that's, that's good. That's another branch of Protestantism, okay? That, I don't think it came out of the Episcopal Church, but Calvin was definitely a leader in that. If you want to read about Calvin, go right ahead. He has all of these theories about predestination that the Episcopal Church has never really touched. And we're not going to get into it, because you also have double predestination. So that's a whole nother area. Look it up and you Google it and read all about it. So who else came out of the Episcopal Church? You have the Methodists, you have the AME. Look at your diagram. Who else came out of the,
Looks like it says the Pentecostals.
Yeah, I was
okay?
gonna say, it looks like only one person, one thing.
No, there's a whole
Anglican,
bunch there, you just gotta read them.
If you look under
Am I looking at the wrong
Anglican,
spot?
Right here, right?
it's a very little drawing.
Like he could have turned
That's
the
how
page
the
this
Anglican,
way and
not
had
the
the whole
Episcopal.
graph this, so you could read it.
Necessarily.
Well, you write big and then you just downsize it.
Yeah, well, they should have
Yeah,
put a high
yeah.
res picture in here, they should,
I should've brought my
this is
magnifying
ridiculous.
Yeah, right, you and me both, right,
It's not
yeah.
helping, I got, really good myopic vision and I'm pretty maxed out on this.
Yeah, the resolution there's terrible.
Yeah, it's more that than the size.
Yeah,
Okay.
What is
Blurry.
that one here? It looks like a straight little line.
not because of vision.
Probably is straight to the
No.
line.
Yeah, it's like, forget it.
Pentecostal is the smallest I
I
got,
think that's,
but that's,
the P, no, it could be an R.
Okay, Plymouth Brethren,
okay, and then United
Wow.
Church.
United Church of Christ,
Oh, okay.
okay?
And then Holiness Salvationists.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Yes, if you come from the Holiness Church, you are very, very conservative. Very conservative.
It depends on
Wonderful.
what you call conservative, because it seems to me that our order of service is more conservative than anything in the Holiness Church.
Well, yes, but I
If you-
mean, in the
you
sense
say
of your
by conservative,
theology.
something that goes way back.
Well,
But in
If
this-
you
but in
like,
this-
if you like traditions, that you, in a sense, conservative. And our order of service goes back, 1,000 years in the main to the Catholic Mass. So that
Okay.
is conservative.
but in the Episcopal and the Holiness churches, it's long sleeves, no, for men and women, no makeup for the women, no cutting hair for the women, no polish,
Right.
long skirts or, ankle
Yes,
length skirts or pants. So from that, I think that's conservative.
Yes.
Right.
And I mean, even little girls, I happen to have a family member who's married a Pentecostal, and so they're divorced and the children are being reared. And I made the big mistake of sending 3 Easter dresses one year
Uh-oh.
with short sleeves. That was the-
Oh my goodness.
So they came out of the Holiness
Just put a sweater on.
Well, if you think about, during the Great Revival, post-revolution, early 1800s, you've got, I have all these names somewhere in the back of my brain and they just don't. Jonathan, somebody help me out here.
History.
You mean, what
Great-
new
great-
denominations?
Jonathan Edwards. There we go, Jonathan Edwards, okay? You have the Great Revival, sinners in the hands of an angry God. Read that sometimes. He just blasts people about being sinners and that they were gonna end up in hell, and he talks about hellfire, and he talks about brimstone, and I tell you what, people fell on their knees to be saved. Okay, now we talked about salvation last week, we're not gonna get into all of that this week, we'll get there again. But sinners in the hands of an angry God, and Jonathan Edwards was probably, I'm trying to think, I'm thinking he was Methodist, but I could be wrong about that. But this whole sense of revival within the United States, and the Episcopal Church was kind of on the edge of that. Didn't really experience that revival so much. That happened more in line with what was called the Oxford movement. That was in England, and you have a whole nother revivalist movement happening there, which eventually it trickles over into the United States.
What's
So-
the name of that church, the Holiness Church?
Pentecostal?
Oh, the Pentecostals.
Yeah.
yes, okay.
But you
The
also
same.
have Pentecostal holiness, and then you've also got holiness.
Yeah.
So it
Yes, they're
depends,
two different
you've got
things.
A
different.
little different.
Yeah.
I just, or
It's in
they,
the
so they're
diagram.
not the same.
They probably were at some point, but you've now got Pentecostal holiness and then you've got holiness. And I think help me out here, Janet and Frank, Holiness Church is more conservative than Pentecostal?
Yes, I
Yes.
think
Okay.
so.
So
In the
true.
sense of how you dress, in the sense of how
Correct.
you live your
Very
life.
strict on that.
Very, it's all of this outward appearance.
Mhm.
It's very, very strict because that's how you are to live your spiritual life, very, very strictly as well. The Episcopal Church has never really been there. They have been at occasions, but it's not been a continuous line like that particular denomination. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Africa. Anglicanism in Africa. White, very white, until you had apartheid, until you had the destruction of apartheid. If you were black in Africa, which most of the population is, you were overruled by a group of white people, mostly men, who probably followed, at least to a degree, the Anglican Church. Not always, but somewhat. And then you have someone like Nelson Mandela, okay, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who comes along and says, enough. Bishop Desmond Tutu. What can anybody tell me about him? What have you read about him? What do you know? Anything at all? What do you know about Archbishop Desmond Tutu?
He won the Nobel Peace Prize, right?
Okay, why? Why would he have won that? Think about that. Why would he have won that?
'Cause he was working to kind of heal some of the wounds that had come out of apartheid.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But
What
wasn't
else?
he Archbishop already under apartheid?
Yes.
Didn't he fight against apartheid?
Yes. Mhm.
So, there were black Anglicans at high levels
Mhm.
prior to the end of apartheid.
Right, but they were still under the auspices of the white government.
To what extent did the government of South Africa control the Anglican Church?
Well, that's a question I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe you could help us
Yeah,
out, Richard.
they didn't, because the real church, the real white church in South Africa was the Dutch Reformed Church.
Right.
And the government was very strongly involved with, they all were members of the Dutch Reformed Church. The Anglican Church was essentially representative or inherited from or whatever the English settlers, who were probably the majority of the whites, but they didn't have the political power. That was still much more with the Boers, the original Dutch. So there was no control of the, and in fact, I think a good number of black people saw the Anglican Church as the way they could get ahead or could move forward, whereas of course they really couldn't in the Dutch Reformed Church.
Okay, is that still true?
Oh no, I don't think it's true now. No, it's all changed now. But the government still doesn't control the Anglican Church. No.
Okay.
So what are most Africans in South Africa today religiously?
I'm not sure I really know. I think it's Anglican more than anybody else.
More Anglicans?
I mean, you always get Catholic, but I think in South Africa there's actually more Anglicans than Catholic, but I'm not sure. I was going there in the 90s, so that was just when apartheid was crumbling, and there's been a lot of changes since. So.
Good. What can you tell us, if anything, about Desmond Tutu?
Well, he is still, right?
Yes.
He's a wonderful, just a charismatic leader. Very, very effective in his presentation and so on. his preaching, and very strongly principled. I think he was one of the, as Lauren said, one of the people behind the Truth and Reconciliation Commission,
Yep.
which was the, I guess, the mechanism they adopted to try to find reconciliation.
Okay.
That's about it.
Okay.
So,
I had the privilege of meeting Desmond Tutu a number of years ago. He is part of an Episcopal/Anglican order called the Order of Julian of Norwich, and he is an oblate. I was an oblate at one time, I am no longer, but he was, and I went, and the vergers at the cathedral did not want me anywhere near him, but I pushed and shoved my way through, and I got to meet him, and he's about, I don't know, he's maybe 5 feet tall, maybe 5'2", very short, but what a personality. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, let's look at that if you go to page 61 in your book. Okay. Have any of you ever heard of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission before?
No.
Who has? Okay. Ethel, what can you tell us about it?
Well, I think this is, let me put this up. In terms of now, the commission that he was head of, appointed to, he was able to bring all of these people who had long years of grievances and under apartheid and whatever, and the people who ruled the country, who perpetrated all of these things against the Africans, South Africans. He was able to get them all together, and through, as I think of it, a catharsis and the true apology, and the idea that these people would, after getting this catharsis out, trust people from the other side who perpetrated these horrendous things against them. They would come together, and he would be success. It would be a success at doing that. I mean, how do you do that? That to me was the most important and just mind-boggling thing. I mean, somebody who killed all of your family and oppression all these years, and then you're sitting in the room with the same people who have done this, and they go through a catharsis too, and you recognize it, and then you're able, I think they called it, in the book, I think they were saying that they called it the Kleenex Commission, because everybody was crying, and the fact that you would believe that the other person who had done these horrible things to you really trust them, saying, you know, I feel bad, I don't, you know, I'm sorry. That to me was the most striking and humbling thing.
Okay. Charlie?
Well, I mean, it seemed to me that the truth part is almost as important as the reconciliation part. And the truth part is that it was designed to lay out exactly what had happened under apartheid, and then, but also to give forgiveness. In other words, not only was there more or less of an amnesty, and this book suggests it wasn't a complete amnesty. I think it was a pretty complete amnesty. It says an amnesty for confessors. You confessed your crimes and you got amnesty. But I think they weren't prosecuting anybody. And as I recall, most of the persecution was done under color of law. I mean, it wasn't illegal persecution, it was legal persecution. They passed laws saying that you needed a pass to go into certain neighborhoods, and the pass had to say that you were white if you wanted to go into the white neighborhood, and you know, or to ride the buses or whatever, or to have certain jobs. So, you know, but I think there were also things that were done secretly, and so that these things all were brought out, and an amnesty was given, and ultimately it was designed, I think, basically to keep the economy going. Because if you have a well-educated white power structure or element of the society that is producing a lot of the income of your country, if all of a sudden you give the vote to everybody, and that means that the black win the elections, the whites might feel, oh, they have no hope in this country. They're going to be persecuted now, and that would set the economy back a long ways. And the Africans, the black Africans in South Africa, didn't want their country to return or to decline to a level like the Congo or something like that, and so they wanted to keep their well-educated white citizens there.
Okay, so you have both a spiritual, shall we say, way of looking at things, but you also have a political way. And somehow or another, Tutu was able to bring those two elements probably together in a good way. Look at the bottom of page 61. Somebody read that, please, right at the bottom.
It's not enough to want peace. You've got to work for it. You've got to find a middle way.
Okay. And the middle way is what he did. If you look at the next page, Finding a Middle Way, you've got the Tutu Education Center at General Theological Seminary in New York City. What happens when we decide that we want to be truthful and that we want to serve for reconciliation? What happens inside of us when we make that kind of choice? To be truthful and to be reconciling.
You ask for forgiveness.
You ask for forgiveness. You also lead a life of forgiveness. And I think Archbishop Desmond Tutu has done that profoundly. He is a little man with a huge spirit. I mean, he literally fills up the room. He really does. If you ever have a chance to hear him, to read a book, I actually have a prayer book of his. Not his prayer book, but it's called the prayer book of Desmond Tutu. It's all of these different writings that he has gleaned through the years and has written them down and published a book of them. So they're not his writings, but they belong to someone else, and they're words, and they are call to action as well as a change of life that has affected him. So if that's something that is of interest to anyone, I would recommend that. It really is a powerful book to be able to read.
What was it called again?
I think the prayer book of Desmond Tutu, or the Tutu prayer book, or something like that. Okay, it is 10 after 8. I'm going to open it up here and say, what has sparked your interest? What has sparked any questions, any thoughts? We've got about 20 minutes, so I want to open it up to you all and say, what are you thinking at this point?
I think it's kind of interesting that like truth and reconciliation idea like hasn't been more widely applied. I mean, it was obviously very successful, and it's just, it could be applied in a lot of places, and it's kind of surprising that it hasn't.
Okay. How do you think it could be applied?
Well, like other countries in the same situation that have, all these horrible crimes against humanity, or however you want to put it. I mean, or just, I don't know, I guess in daily life too.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've tried it in Argentina.
Oh.
After, after all the desaparecidos, and after the Falklands War, the military was overthrown, but they came up with an amnesty for the military, who killed a lot of suspected left-wing sympathizers, and without trials, and so they were called the disappeared. They just, you know, and they, I think, a lot of them were young people. They put the kids in Roman Catholic families to be raised as conservatives and not as, but you know, some of these people were communists, but some of them were just members of labor unions, and then they